Let's talk a little Vols spring preview, and we're going to talk some tight ends as the Vols are just about 10 days away from hitting the practice field. Josh Ward with a series of stories that you can check out on a Vols spring preview. Well, when you talk about tight ends, they got a guy that I happen to like a lot that they have to replace. What is his name?
What's up, everybody? This is Jacob Warren asking you to like, subscribe, and share. Dave needs this.
Rob reminding us also to click like and subscribe. Do that right now. Click subscribe for me. So Jacob Warren, maybe not a superstar at tight end, but a very solid player, Caleb, and a very good leader. I think his loss is going to be felt by this football team of having a known quantity, a known product, a known person that you can put on the field. And we're going to get
as a matter of fact, from a
Kalen, don't worry. Go ahead.
Sorry, what'd you say?
Well, no, Kalen was already asking about Ethan Davis. We're going to get to him.
The problem with Tennessee's tight end room this upcoming year, is they lose both their main guys, Jacob Warren and McCullen Castles, and they were both valuable in different ways. You're right. Jacob Warren was a leader, a glue guy in the offense. You rallied around him. And McCullen Castles, you talk about this all the time, is the type of player you love on your team because he's just so thrilled to be playing at Tennessee, right? And so, now you have to manage. There may be more talent, but you got to manage some egos because the other guys coming up at tight end, they're expecting to get to the NFL. They're expecting, how is this going to maximize, my pro potential? And a little bit different than what you were dealing with this past year. Not that Jacob Warden's not an NFL caliber tight end. I think he is. But he was a leader and a veteran, and McCullen Castles is just, oh my gosh, I am so thrilled to be at Tennessee. McCullen Castles is again, when you get out of a toxic relationship and then you're with a new girlfriend and she's just so nice to you all the time. And it's like, oh my gosh, you're so nice.
No.
And
I Tennessee does lose two. I think one is close to ready. And you mentioned it already on the message board. Ethan Davis. He is uber talented. I've heard the comparisons when talking to NFL scouts between Antonio Gates, who was a basketball star, Ethan Davis was as well, and ended up being just an incredibly athletic tight end. What do you expect out of Ethan Davis this upcoming year? Now, keep in mind, when we talk about these names, we're going to be a pretty short list because Tennessee only plays two tight ends, and then they rotate them per series. So we're basically talking about two guys that are really expected to play. What do you think of Ethan Davis this year?
I think he'll be the primary receiving tight end for Tennessee this year.
How good do you think?
I think he'll be very good. I think this was a plan from the start, was for him to just need a year to develop and get conditioning right, and then he becomes the go-to tight end in Heupel's system. By the way, Heupel at Missouri relied on the tight end a lot, so it's not unique to him. He can do that. And I think this will be the year he does it. I think Ethan Davis is going to be the receiving tight end. I think Holden Stays, everybody talks about. I think that was just for depth, quite honestly. Remind
everybody the background of Holden Stays for those that don't.
Holden Stays transferred to Tennessee from Notre Dame. And I think in large part, he's just a depth guy. I think the reality is Ethan Davis is going to be the main receiving tight end. And I think your blocking tight end, which he goes back and forth with your receiving or your more physical blocking tight end, the ideal situation is the Princeton Fant Jacob Warren rotation, right? Where Princeton Fant is in there for the plays and to move the chains, and Jacob Warren is in there to block and also catch goal line passes. And I think this year that combination is going to be Ethan Davis for the receiving guy, and then it'll either be Charlie Browder or Miles Kitzelman for the physical blocking guy. I don't know who's going to win it, but that's what spring's for. But it is worth watching in spring ball because Emmanuel Okoye is still there and Holden Stays is still there. Those are two athletic tight ends. Holden Stays is more of a hybrid of the two. So watch to see which rotation he uses between those. I do think Josh Heupel is going to spend time trying to figure out his tight end rotation between that. But I think Ethan Davis is a lock to be the receiving tight end already.
I agree. I think the X factor in this room, and maybe the X factor on the entire team, is what Tennessee gets outside of Ethan Davis. And in particular, you mentioned the name Emmanuel Aoer. It would have been really easy for them to put him at the defensive end position. He's the kid, in case you don't remember, that's out of Europe. He came up through the NFL America or NFL Europe program, and it would have been really easy to put him at a defensive end. and have him be a factor. But they decided to put Emmanuel Okoye at tight end. So they must think that he's either a really, really physical player or that he's really athletic like Davis and that he can get open down the field. I think he's a fun X factor to watch because athletically, for those that don't remember when he committed, he is uber talented. I don't know if you remember some of the stats and some of the numbers that he threw out, but Emmanuel Okoye out of Nigeria is an absolute specimen when it comes to his physical ability.
Yeah, and don't underestimate the fact that they converted him when it's more, if they were just going for bodies and roster purposes, they would have kept him at edge rusher because they like to rotate guys in and out there. But they moved him over the tight end, which leads me to believe that they have a rare talent there. Can he get past Ethan Davis, though? I don't know, because you're not going to run those two guys together because neither one of them is going to be that physical, like, force, leverage, width presence and blocking. And so it's only going to be one of them in that rotation, which and then there's also Holden Stays that's in that group. So it's still shocking that they did that, but maybe they saw rare talent. I mean, let's go back to history. We all know the story when Tennessee basically lied to Jason Witten and promised he could play defensive end. And then when he commits and they convert him to tight end. But
I know the story very, very well. Go ahead.
But okay, I would ask you, Dave. It's not like Jason Witten would have been a bad defensive end, right? He'd have been pretty good, right?
Oh, you and John Chavis. John Chavis will sit here and tell you that he would have been a Hall of Fame defensive end in the NFL. Don't go there.
I'm not going there. No, I'm saying would he have been a good defensive end?
He would have been a good defense. He'd have been a good middle linebacker, Leonard Little style. He's an elite athlete.
Yeah, so he could have been a good defensive end, but they saw that the talent was just too rare, so they needed him at tight end, right? Because they saw just a really rare talent for a tight end.
I think the roster is too rare at tight ends. So
You think that's what it was?
Yeah, I think that was his concern, is you're just putting me there. That's coming from an interview right after he got moved. I felt like it was despair time in the Witten household.
But wait a minute. To be fair, that team, when he moved to tight end, Tennessee didn't really need a receiving tight end because they were loaded at receiver with Stallworth, Washington, Bobby Graham.
I know. If you would have told me that he was going to be a Hall of Famer and play for the Dallas Cowboys for 48 years, I would have told you you're crazy that he's going to transfer to Virginia Tech and he's mad, and damn it. And he was. City Heating and Air Conditioning, 50 years in East Tennessee. Integrity matters. Don't trust a fly-by-night HVAC company to tell you need a new unit that could cost you thousands or more. CityHeatandAir.com. CityHeatandAir.com. I remember the question. The most passes that a tight end has ever caught at Tennessee is 20, right? Yeah, I know. Why are they moving me to tight end?
That's the problem. He had looked at Tennessee's past use of tight ends and thought he was going to be relegated to that.
And I brought it up.
Of course you did.
A lot.
But what we forget, and what you probably know, is that they wanted to use David Martin at tight end for that reason.
And David wouldn't move. That's when the whole train started to go off the tracks. Is when David Martin would move to tight end. And then what does he do? He goes to the NFL, and his first Monday Night Football game, he's like, you got to check out this David Martin at tight end. For some reason, the Tennessee coaches were so darn stupid they didn't move him. No, they weren't. He refused to move.
Maybe he was seeing, because who was the starting tight end on the national title team? Eric Diago, was that his name?
Yeah, Diago.
I don't think that Tennessee didn't have the tight end in their system. I just think that they adapted to their personnel, and there were years where they just didn't need the tight end because they had all these receivers. Is that fair to say? They didn't have the receiving tight end.
Yeah, they didn't.
Because Von Rees was used a lot as a receiving tight end.
But they were built on speed too, so why not have a faster slot receiver instead of a slower tight end? The same thing. Why you would have, you would move defensive ends to linebackers and linebackers to safeties, or vice versa. Excuse me. You would have them play at the faster position, so they were built on speed all around.
Yeah,
Eric Diago. You made me feel bad about bringing up Eric Diago's name, by the way.
Why?
I think he was the only starter that didn't make the book. TriStar hats. Go to TriStarHatsCo.com. There's a lot of people that are trying to copy them, but TriStarHatsCo.com is the original. Right now, you get free shipping, but that's only for a short time. Hats, apparel, and more. Should I go back and do a Diago updated version. 2025. The how do you pronounce his name again?
I called him Diago.
Diago, the Diago cut.
Okay,
Like Superman 2, like Superman 2, when they had two different cuts of it for the two directors, the Snyder cut.
Cool. You know what they were doing though? They were following.
One last thing. I got one last show. Celebrate 98, the Diago cut. Go ahead.
Go back and watch the 98 Tennessee Florida game. It's recorded. When you know how in the opening how they mention the starting lineups for every team, they're like, hey, let's meet the starters on Tennessee. You know how they do that? And Sean McDonough is going through the Tennessee players, and he doesn't even mention Eric Diago because they rarely throw to the tight end, and then he just cuts off. I think they were trying to follow the Spurrier method because Spurrier didn't use the tight end a lot, right? He just wanted the extra receiver.
I don't even remember if they had a tight end on their roster.
Yeah, Spurrier didn't care for that, but I think it was like, I don't think Tennessee was ever in a position where they were against using the tight end. I just think that there weren't a lot of options for receiving tight ends during that time. Is that fair to say, Dave, on the recruiting trail?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think across the board, because the proliferation of football on television, that there are more athletes that can play college football than there ever have been. In other words, to answer your question, I'll answer it like this. Okay, Brock Bowers is special, right? But how many really good tight ends were there in the college game last year? Let's say 10. Okay, I think that 20 years ago, it would have been 2 or 3. I think there are more people who apply themselves at the game of football because of the proliferation of it in our society. And there's more people to choose from. Does that answer your question in a roundabout way?
That's a perfect answer to it. You're right, because if the 98 team existed today, Sean Bryson would be playing tight end immediately, wouldn't he?
I think he might have been playing running back. But he could have played a number of positions. Tight end would have been a good one. Now, I do want to give a shout out because this is a good point by SC Scott guy. Ironically, Spurrier produced 4 NFL tight ends at South Carolina, threw to them a lot under him. That's not ironically. That's because he figured out the game. And I wonder, because you would rather go out there and be able to block people around, and then you've got a tight end that can get open. I wonder at what point you'll have a team go power, Caleb, that will be a lot like Iowa, but let's say with a Calvin Johnson out there, just a guy like a Dalton Connect to make a play or two to keep you from being stagnant, but be a power football team that controls the ball. I'm waiting for that team. I think that's the next evolution of the game. And it might be called the boring era, but Iowa had success with it.
There's been a defensive renaissance in college football. As you guys have looked at the numbers the last few years, Dave, you just laid the formula for how Nebraska returns to power. This should be what Nebraska does, is play power football and find the Calvin Johnson. It's kind of like
give him as much as you've got to give him. I mean, especially if you're a running football team, you're not giving your offensive guard $5 million. Go find Megatron or whoever that guy might be and offer him and another receiver a ton of money to open up the box and then run the football. You don't even have to have a great tailback anymore. I think that's going to happen. I don't know where it's going to happen now.
And half of the evolution of college football is this, though, and this is a big part of it. Half the evolution of college football is if you're doing something that nobody else is doing, so it's hard. They don't have the personnel to prepare for you. Is that fair to say? Like the biggest reason the fun and gun worked in the 90s, I'll just say it. I'm not sure the fun and gun would have worked in the Pac-10 in the 90s because they all had more spread out offenses and they were already adjusted.
But subsequently spread out defenses that were adjusted to that. Yes,
exactly. But the SEC was so run oriented, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Here comes Spurrier, throwing it all over the field. And I think Spurrier knew that. It's not like he wouldn't have adjusted as SC Scout guy says he did. But the reason it worked so well is because everybody had that extra linebacker was so big that was almost a defensive lineman at that time, right? And Spurrier knew he could take advantage of it.